Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to another episode of Sree's Daily COVID-19 Show. My name is Sree Sreenivasan, and it's my honor to convene this daily conversation around various aspects of COVID-19. We talk about the health crisis, the financial crisis, the racial inequality crisis. We're always looking for guests and theme suggestions. Please email us, sree@sree.net. We would love to hear from you, hear your ideas on how we can cover the biggest crisis of our time. Today, we have a very special episode number 145. We've been live for 145 days, no breaks, no weekends, no vacation, all through the pandemic. As long as New York City's on lockdown, we are going to do the show. We're live on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, and on LinkedIn. And for episode 145, we needed a major guest and a major show, and we have that for you. We're joined tonight by Oren Segal to talk about fighting hate under COVID. He's the vice president of the Center on Extremism with ADL, a leading anti-hate organization. And I'm thrilled that my co-host is Jennifer Lazarus at I Am Jenny Lazarus, VP of Business Development and Strategy at Digimentors, my company that I'm so honored to work with her and our team with. And Oren's on Twitter at Oren Segal. Please follow him, ORENSEGAL. You'll meet both of them in just a couple of minutes. Please share the show so everybody can learn at this very important topic. We'll talk about what's happening in real life as well as online, and we're going to learn a lot together. Hi, everybody. I'm Sree Sreenivasan. I'm the Marshall Loeb Visiting Professor of Digital Innovation at Stony Brook School of Journalism and the co-founder of Digimentors, a social, digital, and virtual events consulting business. Our motto, don't cancel your in-person event or even plan your virtual event without talking to us. You see my email address right here. Please email me. If we can help you, we absolutely will. We are able to bring the show to you because of the amazing team of folks that works on this show. Rose Horowitz 31 on Twitter and Vandana_Menon on Twitter are two producers who work with me every single day for 145 days. Please email us if you have suggestions for speakers, and we'll thank our sponsors in just a minute. As you can see, in our first 140 shows, we've had 1 million viewers, 100 million social impressions, 260 guests, 148 of them women from 53 cities, 15 countries, including the chief scientist of WHO. And we're able to do this because of our partnership with Scroll.in, 2 million plus followers on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. They are one of India's top news, business, and culture websites. Please check them out at Scroll.in. We are very grateful to all of you for being here, and we want to thank our sponsors, starting with Muckrack Academy. Fundamentals of Social Media, a free certification course now available, mrac.co/social, mrac.co/social. Everybody can sign up. Everybody can learn, as I did putting this together. More than 4,000 people have signed up for that course already. We want to thank our other sponsor, Nunbelievable, divinely delicious cookies on a mission. Each box of handcrafted cookies purchased provides 2 meals to those in need. 20% off with the code SREE, S-R-E-E, nunbelievable.com, divinely delicious cookies on a mission. 20% off with the code SREE. And we want to tell you about one other show, She's on Call, every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern. This past Sunday, our two doctor friends, two surgeon friends, Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar and Dr. Marina Kurian, host a show where they talk about COVID, but they also talk about other things happening in medicine. And yes, there are other things happening in medicine. Dr. Ben Chang, hand surgeon, and Dr. Claudette Lejam, orthopedics, were both guests this yesterday. So you can find this on She's on Call. Please check it out at She's on Call on Facebook and on Twitter and on YouTube. And don't forget to check out the 145 episodes we've done on this show by going on to our archives on youtube.com/Sreenet. So with that, let me bring on Jenny Lazarus to say hi to her, and then we're going to meet Oren Segal. Everyone, right now, please tag a friend. Please share. Right now, they can watch live or later, and you will learn a lot watching this episode live or later. Let me bring on Jenny, and here she is, Jenny Lazarus. Hi, Jenny.
Hi, Sree. Great to be here.
So great to see you. We see each other many times a day on Zoom because we work together at Digimentors. You are a former chief digital officer, a journalism professor, a journalist. We first met some years ago when you were a student at Columbia. We will not name the exact number of years.
Yeah.
Please tell us what it's like to be doing this kind of work where you're doing biz dev and strategy at a much smaller institution than what you're used to.
I will say it's extremely exciting. We're doing incredible work right now. We are innovating and we are answering calls for what is needed out there in the digital and social realm. So I'm very excited to be part of this, what I think is a groundbreaking company and a crew of very, very talented people. As you'll see with the show tonight, we're putting out all kinds of extremely valuable content, especially at a time right now where we are dealing with such crises like the COVID crisis, as well as racial injustice around the country and many other issues that we are all facing regularly. There's so much that is out there and so much that we can do to help curate the information. So I'm excited. I love the opportunity.
And I'm so grateful that you've joined the team. Your arrival has shaken us all up in a good way and given us a kick to make sure that we can help as many people around the world as we're doing. We're doing dozens of virtual events, plus our consulting and other work. And it's great to be with another former chief digital officer. So are we ready for Oren? We'll pretend.
I'll only add one thing, that being a part of Digimentors is certainly a full circle moment for me, because Sree has been my mentor for, and I'm not going to say how many years, but has truly inspired my career. So this is really, you know, a nice moment for me as well.
Thank you. And we want to say to everybody, last night we had a show, our regular Sunday night positivity show, and we announced that we had our colleague Neil Parikh has joined us to work with us as on our team full time. He's left the United Way worldwide team that he was part of to work with us, and that's just part of the excitement at Digimentor. So anybody who would like more information, please email me or email Jenny, and you can see she's on Twitter as well. Very easy to find. So are we ready for Oren?
We're ready.
Okay, so we'll pretend he's not listening. What should I know about him before he comes on stage?
Oren is one of the funniest people you'll ever meet, but you might not see that side of him tonight. He's extraordinarily passionate about the work he does, which is incredibly important in that he is out there every day fighting hate, boots on the ground, working to eliminate some of the most cancerous, I should say, rhetoric and activity around the country. And Oren and the ADL are doing incredible work. And so, and not only is he a friend, but I greatly admire everything he does.
And that's so important, that we're not just fighting the virus, we're fighting the virus of hate, misinformation, disinformation. And that's why Oren's joining us. Jenny, did you have a chance to tell your family and friends that you're on the show?
I did. I hope they all got the information.
And they should all be joining us and telling us where they're watching.
Hopefully my family up in Canada right now is tuning in. So
yeah, and they know that we want to hear from them. They should tell us where they're watching from. And yes. I know Oren's also shared. So let me bring Oren on here. Let me just once again remind everyone what we're doing. Oren Segal is VP of the Center on Extremism. He's with the ADL, a leading anti-hate organization, and our topic tonight, fighting hate during COVID. We are so grateful to have with us Oren Segal. Thank you so much, Oren, for being here. And here you are. Hi, Oren.
Hi there. How are you?
Great to have you with us. I want to start. The first question I always ask is, how are you doing? How's your family through the crisis?
So I will tell you that, you know, seeing how kind you both were to each other, talking about, you know, Jenny said you're a mentor and there's such positive vibes here. You know, I kind of hate to take this down a notch with some of the reality that we're talking about, but thank you for asking that question. The family's good. You know, listen, as all things considered, things could be a lot worse, and we know that they're a lot worse for others. So we're counting our blessings, and I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Working remotely, going from one Zoom call to another. Is that the life of Oren Segal?
Yeah, and it's weird. You know, I've learned to, while being on one Zoom call to another, for some reason, I always find myself looking at myself and not others on the screen. Today, I promise that I'm going to look right into that little camera and not at myself.
We were just talking about that. That's one of the things we teach people, that you don't need the lesson, but everybody on these Zoom calls is looking down because they want to see their friends instead of looking up when you're trying to sell on camera. And that's what you have to do. And that's one of the tiny things that we help people with. There's a video of Trevor Noah and Jon Stewart, and John is, you know, looking all over the place like a lot of people do. And Trevor says, John, you got to look at the camera. And John says, oh my God, I've done 100 of these. No one's ever said, look at the camera.
I think, and perhaps some people are just afraid of what they're afraid of what they look like, and they want to make sure they're not completely embarrassed. But we're good.
We're good. And, you know, we said this would be, as Jenny said, that you are one of the funniest people, and we're talking about very serious things. But I do want to say, I believe that if we don't laugh a little, we'll be crying all day, given the terrible state of things here. How do you remain positive before we talk about your very difficult work? How do you remain positive? How do you keep your family upbeat through all of this?
Well, listen, I don't think you can get through not only a pandemic, but do the work of trying to understand and combat extremism and hate without being hopeful. So, you know, me looking at sort of the underbelly of society for 20 years, in some way that's training for me to try to look at the bright side of things. The moment you lose hope is a moment that, you know, you need to do something else. So I get strength from colleagues and others who really care about making a difference. And so, you know, that helps me get through.
That's so good to know. So let's start at the top. Tell us about the ADL. That's a name change, I gather, or at least the branding change. You can talk about that. And the Center on Extremism. We have a lot of people watching around the world who may not be familiar with both yet, and that's why you're on the show.
Yeah, so the ADL is a over 100-year-old organization in the United States, and its ultimate goal is as an anti-hate organization is to do two things: to stop the defamation of the Jewish people, but to secure justice and fair treatment to all. Right? That's a mission that was created over 100 years ago. And when you really think about what that means, there was a recognition from those who created this organization that in order to fight anti-Semitism, you have to fight all forms of bigotry. And the only way to combat all forms of bigotry, be it Islamophobia, be it homophobia, be it racism, is to combat anti-Semitism. It's just another way of saying we're all in this together, and, you know, one's cause is everyone's cause. And so within the ADL, which does a whole range of advocacy work regarding civil rights, regarding a whole range of other topics, my specific role is to lead our team that looks at extremism and hate. And that's organized extremist movements, that's hatred on the ground and online, and find ways to try to mitigate it. That's by being allies for communities that are impacted. That's by doing deep dives into the spaces that you don't want to be on in order to understand the plans and the organizing that extremists do, working with law enforcement, in fact, to try to mitigate that. It's also working with the tech industry, right? We know that there are many algorithms and many platforms, and we're spending more time of our day on these computers than we are, you know, face to face. And so the next level of combating hatred has to be a more concerted effort working with the industry.
So what are we looking at here on the website? Just walk us through what people can find if they search Center for Extremism on adl.org.
Yeah, so I think a good place to get some of the resources and knowledge that we make publicly available is to go to adl.org, and, you know, you'll find our educational programs, which is teaching kids you know, how to not be innocent bystanders in the face of bullying, how to recognize hatred, right? ADL trains and works with 1.5 million kids every single year, approximately. It also has a place where you can find backgrounders on the latest extremist groups. You can find information on anti-Semitic tropes throughout the years, our data-based reporting. You know, for us, it's really important not to just have anecdotes and stories, but to provide data, because we know that data is what enables you to resource to the threats. So one area on our website that I recommend people check out is called our heat map. It's where you actually have over, you know, 12,000 points on a map that you're able to identify the types of activities that have happened in your area. There you go. Thank you for bringing that up. And that's interactive. So you can select white supremacist propaganda in Wisconsin, or, you know, terrorist plots in Florida or Wisconsin or Michigan or anywhere around the country. And it's sobering. There's a lot of points on this map of bad things that have happened. But let me just say one more thing. Every one of those points is also a reminder of communities that have come together to combat that hatred.
Wow.
Wow.
Jenny, you have a question?
I'm just amazed by the map. I'm just really taken aback by the volume of activity around the country. And I'm sure this doesn't even really scratch the surface. So it's really incredible. And there's a lot to be learned here. Amazing.
And I love the tech here as well. It's really good, Oren. It's great to see that. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, you know, you're able to choose different data sets, but also different years. So you can go back to 2002 on a drop down that's a little bit higher up. It explains each data set. Again, this is not meant to, you know, create anxiety and fear in communities. This is meant to educate people about what's going on, right? And so the only way that you can start to address issues of hate is to literally know what's happening around you. And we don't always necessarily know even what's happening in our own communities. So this is just one tool that helps with that.
And so you can see the increase over time, right? That's what you're looking at here, and seeing, you're also tracking newer and newer kinds of data as well, it looks like.
Yes, and frankly, one of our goals over time is to increase the amount of data sets that we have. I would love for one day for this map to show all incidents of, you know, racism, anti-LGBTQ incidents, anti-Muslim, not because these are good incidents, but because the more that we can show the data, the more trends that we might be able to identify, and the more that we can use this for advocacy with elected officials to tell them to resource to these threats.
And I love the play on words here. A heat map is a typical thing we use in data visualization, you know, where the activity is, but HEAT actually stands for hate, extremism, anti-Semitism, and terrorism. And we can see how it's all connected and is leading to the situation we're in right now. I have a couple more questions for Oren, and then I'm going to hand this over to Jenny. They've known each other for a long time, and Jenny's been thinking about the questions to ask Oren. Let's go over to the Center on Extremism and talk a little bit, please, about its origins. How long has it been there? You said you've been doing this work for 20 years. So tell us your journey as well. And everybody watching, we're live right now on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And we'd love to hear from you and tell us where you're watching from. What is your reaction to seeing some of this? What's it like in your country? Because I know Oren does work internationally as well. And Oren, I should say that I had the honor of being on a panel in a fireside chat with Jonathan Greenblatt, and it was amazing to hear from him firsthand the kind of work that the leadership is doing and the staff. That was before pandemic. It seems a lifetime ago, but you're busier now than you've ever been, isn't it?
It's true. And yeah, Jonathan has been the CEO for 5 years at ADL. And, you know, it's really helped sort of modernize a 106-year-old organization, you know, using all the great work and experience and then trying to put it into a modern age, if you will. And what we're actually seeing, you mentioned with this pandemic and how things have changed, is you have to think about it this way. You know, extremism and hate has always been there. But what are the requirements for extremism and hate to really take hold, for it to win hearts and minds of people? And that requires fear and anxiety and uncertainty, pretty much everything that so many of us have been experiencing during this pandemic, right? And that's what extremists rely on. They prey upon that. And so, you know, our work, which has always been very, very timely, unfortunately, you know, has just sort of become even more intense with, you know, having to deal with the pandemic and the impact that that has had. And I just want to make one more point here. Today's the anniversary of 1 year shooting in El Paso, where 23 people were killed and 23 other injured by a white supremacist. And so again, that was well before a pandemic, exactly 1 year ago today. And so we know that extremism and hate has been there for a while. So I actually hope that we can use this moment where we're more isolated in some ways, and in other ways trying to reach out to people in different ways, maybe like this show, is that we can recommit ourselves to trying to find ways to push back on the hatred that seems to be an anniversary, frankly, every day. Hi, Jenny.
Hi, Oren. Wow, that's fascinating stuff. Talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing specifically during the pandemic. What have you seen? Has anything changed? I know that hate and the proliferation of hate messages and all that goes with it never changes, but perhaps the way we see it in different times changes. For instance, you know, has the pandemic given rise to any new forms of hate or of anything of the like?
Yeah, it's an important question. You know, we have seen, not surprisingly, as the pandemic grew, first and foremost, the effort at disseminating disinformation and misinformation.
Right.
And that's something that we've been experiencing and concerned about, you know, in this country and around the world, you know, with regard to elections, with regard to, you know, what are facts and what's fiction. This went into overdrive when the pandemic occurred. And so we saw conspiracy theories about, you know, the Asians bringing this into, you know, the country and around the world. Not surprisingly, when you have conspiracy theories, eventually you reach to conspiracy theories about Jewish people, about how they're trying to benefit financially and otherwise from the pandemic, right? These are sort of classic conspiracy theories, but that have a modern twist. And that instead of, you know, somebody putting it on some bulletin board in the middle of the town square, they're putting it on someone's Facebook wall, right? Or on a Twitter account or on YouTube, where the world can access conspiracy theories that are created faster than any other time in human history. And I just want to say this is having a real impact. You know, at ADL, we've been counting anti-Asian related hate incidents related to COVID. You know, we continue to see a significant spike there. We also see, as I mentioned before, extremists feeling like this is the time where there's a captive audience to try to reach people. And so we've seen them double down on trying to disseminate their hateful propaganda. And in some cases, trying to actually weaponize the virus itself by encouraging people to go cough on minority communities so they get sick. Now, I don't want people to be afraid that someone's going to go cough on you, but we need to understand the mindset of extremists who never miss an opportunity to leverage a crisis.
Yeah, I can imagine. And it brings to mind the fact that with so much time at home now, parents and kids online for hours on end, I know my own. Have you seen an uptick in the amount of disinformation aimed at kids or, you know, perhaps social media platforms that are being hit more than they had in the past, knowing that so many people are spending many more hours online?
Yeah, Jenny, I mean, that really is one of the more important questions that people need to understand, is that, you know, kids are not immune from spending time in those spaces in which there's hate and extremism. I put it this way sometimes, that the places where my kids are spending their time online are the same spaces that my investigators are spending their time trying to weed out and understand extremism and hate. So it's really important that parents who are dealing with a lot of issues, right? It's whether it's you know, homeschooling or working from home, balancing all the stresses of the pandemic, you know, their health, maintain and continue to observe what their kids are doing online. You know, it's about building trust, but it's also about recognizing and educating oneself about the fact that there are people who are trying to prey upon. And so I'll just give one quick example, which is, you know, one of these platforms that has been in the news, it seems like every single day, especially the last 3 days, is TikTok, right? I mean, TikTok is one of the more popular platforms amongst certain, you know, a generation of people. And I know that in the tracking of extremists, they are trying to, you know, create content to lure people on that platform. Now, I'm not picking on TikTok. The same thing has happened on every gaming app you can imagine, as well as Facebook and YouTube and Twitter. And some people are doing a better job at sort of removing that from their platforms than others. But the bottom line is, we can't assume that our kids will always be able to recognize hate. We have to teach them to recognize it and to speak out.
Are you ever concerned about the vulnerability of people during a time like this, that perhaps when there's so much widespread suffering, that people are more susceptible to this type of luring online, not just kids, of course, but adults, anybody?
Yeah, I think the idea that people are vulnerable and are suffering, whether it's economically, whether it's with health, whether it's what are the prospects, right? How are things going to change? Are things going to change?
Right.
I think that's a legit question that we all ask ourselves every day. I think, we've talked about, what is school going to be like next year? How are we going to get past, the next 6 months? Everybody, no matter what station in life you are in, has legitimate fears and anxieties. And so that really is a requirement for those who will try to lure you in. It's human nature to blame the situation that people find themselves in on others. And extremists and bigots are trying to leverage that. They are trying to tell you that you're in this situation because of person A or person B or group C. And we have to be extra vigilant, against that type of stereotyping, because there are people who are going to want to create a division between a lot of different Americans, a lot of people around the country. And we have to be a step ahead of them and not succumb to them even during this difficult time. That's why I think there's hope, because for everybody who's trying to divide us, you can reach out to somebody else and be an ally and give them another alternative instead of the stereotyping and hate that will be in front of them.
Very interesting. I'm sure this is the obvious question or thought on everyone's mind in general, and those listening tonight, that how much does the current administration really play into what now has become mainstream, right? So a lot of these fringe organizations that promote conspiracy theories and extremist rhetoric are now, we're talking about them in mainstream media. How much do you really believe, or are there any data points where you can draw a line between the current administration and those in power right now and what we're seeing in terms of the widespread, or rather in terms of now mainstream media and mainstream rhetoric, including conversations about these fringe organizations?
Yeah, I think there's no direct line between any one person and the sort of rise in polarization and hatred that we're seeing. But that being said, what we have seen is, public figures not sort of using their bully pulpit, right? Their opportunity to consistently and clearly speak out against hate. That's one thing ADL advocates for, no matter who is speaking, no matter what political party you're part of. Those who are in a position of influence should be using that position to speak out against hatred and bigotry, certainly not be in a position to foment it. That being said, it's more than any one person or this administration, right? I mentioned social media creating an environment where people have access to hate in ways that they never have had before. In fact, extremist and hateful ideas exist in the same space as legitimate news, right? And that requires people to be trained on how to recognize the difference. That's not happening overnight. Our technology is always going faster than our morality. And so it's our job to sort of slow it down and give people the critical skills that they need. But at the same time, we have seen some extremists taking cues from the broader public discussion. 20 years ago when I first started doing this job, I remember seeing these hateful conspiracy theories on some fringe Usenet forum, that nobody would really see except a couple of extremists, myself, and maybe, some cops. Now, those same crazy ideas right? Conspiracy theories like steeped in hatred. I feel like we see them not only on our cable news channels and on the Twitter feeds of public officials, but just saturating every day on our phones. That's the mainstreaming of hate. That's why we see over, nearly 3,000 pieces of white supremacist propaganda around the country, not having blatant swastikas and hateful speech, although there's some of that, but many of them echoing the language of our public debates on immigration, on Muslim bans, on other hot topic issues in which they're able to leverage. So we, again, need to be very careful to call out hate whenever it exists before we forget what it even looks like.
Hi, I've just come back into the show. What a great conversation. I should let you folks just continue. I feel like I'm learning so much from both of you. But we did want to do what we call our global tour to show people, to show Oren where people are watching from. And Oren, as I show you these places, if you have any memories of them or you've been there or you want to go there, you can tell us that as well. One place the first place you've already been, obviously, because it is the Village in New York. So any favorite restaurants or memories of the Village that you want to share?
Well, let me just say, growing up in New York when I did, things have changed quite a bit. And I'm not sure I would really recognize much of Lower Manhattan anymore. But I'm sure that I could find some old brownstone that I used to spend time in.
And Jonathan has watched for 145 straight days on the show, and he's been a guest because he's been such a great consumer of our show. Lisa Lazarus says, looking forward to this discussion. I presume a connection to one of the two of you. I'm not sure who. Pradnya is watching from Silver Spring, Maryland. Sudha is watching from Hastings on Hudson. And Deborah Kerr from Asheville, North Carolina. Feel free to jump in, either of you, if you've been to these places. And Rick is watching from Charlotte, North Carolina. So North Carolina is in the house. We're like doing the southern swing right here. Paula Kiger in Tallahassee, Florida, one of our colleagues at Digimentors, incredible journalist and editor.
Sree, I have to say, like, my mind is terrible in the sense, like, I'm so trained that whenever I see a town, I think of the terrorist attack that occurred there. It's just sort of second nature. You can't help it. So I don't want to be too depressing. I've never been told that I should be a motivational speaker, but Tallahassee reminds me of a new sort of extremist movement that I think is important for viewers to be aware of, which is called the incel movement, involuntary celibate. Just last year, there was somebody who killed 2 women at a yoga studio there, whose fundamental belief was that because he was not able to, get with women the way he wanted to, he developed a serious hatred of women. And this is now a growing movement in which people have been killed in Canada, in the United States, and elsewhere because misogyny and sexism needs to be understood as a motivator of extremism the same way racism and other forms of bigotry are. We don't always consider those as like gateways or hallmarks of extremism, but those days are over. So I'm sorry to take it in the wrong direction, and I'm sure our viewer Paula has nothing to do with this, but it's just something that came to mind.
Thank you, and it's really important that we recognize this, and Paula, being the great journalist she is, she will completely understand. Tejas Patel says, great work. Sudha says, when the messages come from the top of this administration that is the Chinese flu, many people will hate the Chinese. Eileen is watching from South Florida. By the way, our thoughts are with the people in South Florida and all along the coast as the storm and hurricane, I think it's been downgraded, but still a problem, is coming through. Elise says, very interesting topic. Thank you, Oren and Jenny, for this important discussion. Linda Bernstein, also our colleague, is watching from the New York Berkshires. And Linda says, I have so much respect for the ADL and I admire what Oren Segal is saying, but I think that the current administration propagates conspiracy theories. So just want to ask you, Oren, a couple of people have pushed back at you on that a little bit. Is it because of their own political, they want to hear that that's true? Or do you think that what you're saying, that it's not just the administration to blame?
So listen, I understand those who want to, blame the current administration, the champion in the highest office, for emboldening some of the extremism and hate. And listen, ADL has spoken out repeatedly against this administration at times where that has happened. It is no coincidence that, during the presidential campaign of 2016, that misogyny, anti-immigrant extremism, anti-Muslim bigotry was at sort of a premium during that campaign, and that we saw hate crimes rise, that we saw anti-Semitic incidents rise, and that other forms of hate and activity by white supremacists increased. So yes, there is a responsibility of people in this administration to call it out. My only point is this, that we cannot only look at blaming one element for a very complex problem. For us to solve the issue of hate and extremism, it's, requires more than a different administration. We're silly to think that it would go away. Frankly, we have been studying extremism and hate for years. And, over the last 10 years, we've seen that right-wing extremists and white supremacists have killed more people, than any other form of extremism. But that didn't start in 2016. That's something that has been going on for a long time. And the only way for us to mitigate it more is to look at all the ways that hate and extremism is spread and that it foments. That's online, that's in our communities, and yes, that is also by our elected officials not being courageous enough to speak out against it consistently.
Thank you. Neil Parikh, also on our team, is watching, says watching from Springfield, Virginia. Glad LinkedIn is working today, and I'm hoping Oren will be able to share our content on all these channels later. And Neil is the executive producer of our Sunday show, which is called the Sunday New York Times Read Along. And our guest was Matt Goldman yesterday, New York Times bestselling author and Emmy Award-winning TV writer. His credits include Seinfeld, Ellen, and The New Adventures of Old Christine. I had such a great time. I'm a huge Seinfeld fan, so we geeked out for the last 15 minutes and only talked about Seinfeld and had a wonderful time doing so. So please check that out. It's in our archives as well. Let's keep looking at a few more comments, and then I'm going to hand this back to Jenny. My mom's watching from Kerala, India. Hi, Amma. Love you. Oren, have you been to India?
I have not, regrettably, but when this is all over and I can get back on a plane again, that's one of the first places I would love to visit.
Oh, please let me know. We will make sure you have a grand old time. My family lives in Kerala, the home of the Cochin Jews, you may have heard. And we also have a synagogue there. The oldest synagogue outside of the Middle East is in Kerala, in the unfortunately part of town called Jewtown. It's named Jewtown. That's the, like Chinatown, Jewtown. They don't, the way words are used are different in different places. But most people hearing that are kind of surprised to hear that. But that's in Cochin. Nirmit is watching from Charlotte. Great work. How to fight hate crime on social media. I am being trolled all the time for being liberal. So over to you, Oren, for some tips, please.
Question.
Yeah, so I think we have to sort of define terms, right? Hate crime, the concept there is that as an actual crime that is committed. And I think one of the problems that we have found with harassment online, with trolling, is that a lot of this is not necessarily criminal. And what's worse, a lot of it is really hard to uncover and identify. So, I remember we did a study on journalists that were being harassed who were reporting on the presidential campaign. Some of them were Jewish, others were perceived to be Jewish, but it got so bad that people started posting their home addresses, the names of their children and families online in order to try to silence them. And, in some cases, I would say in most cases, the people who were responsible for doxing them, for outing them in that way, were hiding behind fake screen names and places that you couldn't find. And I think that's one of the challenges that we have is what do you do when, somebody is harassing you online in a significant way or making threats? You call local law enforcement. And oftentimes local law enforcement is not able to do an investigation in complicated online forums the way they would to try to protect you in real life. So this is one of the areas that ADL is sort of doubling down on, is creating stronger laws that will enable people who engage in this process to be held accountable, and also trying to make it that these companies are more responsible for those who are trying to exploit their services. It's not unreasonable for Sree and Jenny and myself to think that we should be able to go to our favorite platform and not be harassed and doxxed, as that viewer talked about. That's not unreasonable, and we should demand better from these companies.
Thank you. Folks, if you're just joining us, you're watching a conversation with Oren Segal, who is of the ADL's Center on Extremism. And my co-host is at I am Jenny Lazarus, Jennifer Lazarus, my colleague at Digimentors. And Oren is at Oren Segal. Please please follow him and connect with him. Athili says, thanks, we'll visit again. Sudha says, about 80 years ago, Jewish people were discriminated against in New York. I'm glad that the organization was created for everyone. And that's an important point, that ADL, as you told us, believes that in the one way to fight anti-Semitism is to fight all extremism. And that's an important point that I don't think everyone knows. And so many people are commenting and posting. We're just so grateful. John says Trump uses patriotism and religion to gain profit. Apollo's watching from Vegas. Do you have a Vegas memory you're allowed to share in public?
Yeah, actually, Vegas was one of the last places I visited where I did some public speaking at various events there prior to the pandemic. And so, in some ways, the good news is I got one more visit to Vegas before everything was shut down. But listen, I think Vegas is one of those places where, you get people from all over the world, right? And one of my favorite things to do actually at the airport when I land in Vegas is not play the slot machines, but actually look at people from around the world coming together. Now, their motivations may be, not the purest in the world, but Vegas is one of those places like in New York, where I really enjoy just sitting at an airport because it's almost like, being somewhere in Queens, New York, where you have a little bit of everything. And that's actually kind of what brought me to this work in the first place. I got to be honest with you.
Sure. Thank you. John says kids are not safe online. What is your response?
I think kids can be safe online, but not if, parents are not, paying some attention, not if we are not having honest discussions with our kids to tell them to, let us know if there's something that's wrong. I take the subway in New York, at least prior to the pandemic, almost every day. And one thing you always hear is, if you see something, say something. Well, I think what we need to start teaching our kids, if we're going to give them phones, if we're going to allow them on Instagram and all these other platforms, is, hey, you can be on there, but if you see something, you need to say something. And we will help educate you. One thing I want to tell your viewers and listeners, ADL's website has a hate symbols database. These are symbols that are commonly used by extremists. Some of them are blatant, but some of them you wouldn't even know that certain contexts suggest that they are actually extremists. That's one way parents can educate themselves and their kids, is to go through some of these symbols and say, okay, now I know what to look for in case, I come up with something. There's nothing better to fighting hate than educating yourself.
So I just found this very easily on the ADL website, adl.org, and it says under research and tools. Before I hand it to Jenny, these are, most of these I have no idea. And how do I make sure I'm not jumping to conclusions and accidentally adding to the problem when my kids may not know that they're, so talk about that fine line between education and overreacting and
sure. Yeah, you're going to see some numbers and code words, and right now it looks like you're scrolling through some of the numbers section, but there's a bunch of other imagery and symbology as well. And it's really important not to jump to conclusions, but to take everything in context. And I'll give you a great example that has been in the news quite a bit, is the OK hand symbol. Now, for many years, OK has meant OK, but some white supremacists, especially on the 8chan and these online forums, they wanted to troll the media. They wanted to troll the people by saying that actually is a symbol of white supremacy. And over time, it got enough people to use it as a trolling effort in an ironic way, right? So that, okay, for some people actually was meant to symbolize something more nefarious, something more extremist. Now, we have that on our hate symbols database, but we're very clear that if somebody's just saying okay 99% of the time or more than that, it's just okay. But if your kid is going on some sort of platform and sees somebody, doing the okay sign, and it has some other codes and language that is commonly used by extremists, that combination may signify that there's something more nefarious going on. So context is always key. Never jump to a conclusion based on any one thing. But it's almost like, you know, when you're driving, keep your eyes on the road. When you see everything, you'll be able to make better judgments.
I think a lot of parents, like myself, will feel overwhelmed at the prospect of trying to control or trying to make sure that they're not missing anything that their kids are doing on social media, or they're not missing any signs and symbols. And it's a very scary prospect. How should parents try to cope with that? Yeah,
I mean, I imagine the first thing parents should do is say, you're not going to catch everything, right? We're not going to be perfect. It's not going to be right every time. But I just think it's open discussion, and it's about critical thinking. You know, it's having a conversation and letting kids know at the appropriate age that there are people who want to, you know, deliver messages that are intended to, you know, spread hatred. You know, one of the ways we have, I mentioned, an educational programs at ADL, and we have curriculum that is created to help students not only identify hate, but again, how to sort of be allies in that fight. And one of the sort of lasting lessons there is that, you know, you need to be able to be an ally for a classmate or somebody else who might be getting bullied. So part of it may not be, I got to know every symbol and possible thing online, because that really does change every week. But at minimum, you should be able to identify somebody who's experiencing hatred or bullying and know that it is incumbent upon you to stand up for them, right? I mean, in some ways, if you think about it, this is one of the ultimate lessons from the Holocaust, right? We teach people that when the worst sort of scenarios arise, is that you have a decision to make about standing up and being counted in a sense of being heard. And I think that's what we should expect our kids to as well. Be allies. Teach them how to speak up against hate. That sort of lesson, that sort of education, I think will go even farther than, you know, some of the symbols that we're talking about.
Is there anything that people, everyday citizens, can do or within their communities to help combat hate? We see so much hate around us every single day. This country, you know, has experienced many racial injustice marches and rallies and, you know, all these things, you know, bringing these issues to the surface, which I'm glad that we're talking about these and we're having these difficult conversations and we're bringing this stuff to the surface, like I said. But what can people do every day within their communities to fight extremism?
Yeah, so I have a couple of thoughts on that. The first one might seem a little too simple, but I encourage people to listen. Just listen. You know, I think sometimes, especially in sort of social media world, we sort of anticipate what can we say next? How can we score like political points or other points by, you know, how we pile up on each other. But I think in moments, especially like that we're in now, just listening to other people to understand their perspective, even if you don't agree with them, that's important, right? That's sort of teaching empathy and putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. So, okay, listen, here's some other practical things. When somebody sees an incident of hate, say vandalism at a mosque or a synagogue or a church, or somebody witnesses some sort of act of intimidation or hate, report it. Either report it to law enforcement, report it to ADL. You know, we collect incidents, as you saw on the heat map, from around the country. But again, having data is really important to trying to resource to these threats, and having laws changed and having educational programs brought to communities. You need the data. Data does the talking. Another thing is hold people accountable, whether it's the President of the United States or the head of the PTA. Use your voice to speak out against hatred wherever it comes from. You know, it's not always easy, but it's something that, you know, you model that behavior. And then lastly, and there's many other things we could talk about, but again, it's allyship. You know, I think it's reaching out to other communities that maybe you have nothing to do with when they are victimized, letting them know that you are there for them, that you are there to support them. because it's only a matter of time before your community is going to be impacted. And you don't want to look around and see nobody there. The more that we can stand up for each other, I think the stronger we will all be. And frankly, that's what gives us hope in the face of all this hatred.
Should people have the reasonable expectation of some sort of recourse when reporting these kinds of incidents, right? Whether reporting to the ADL or law enforcement, will they be heard?
So, I mean, when people report to ADL an anti-Semitic incident or something, I mean, absolutely they're going to be heard. I mean, we track it. We put out a report every year. So, for example, in 2019, we put what we call our audit of anti-Semitic incidents. Every year since 1979, we've put out a report on how many incidents of anti-Semitism were reported to ADL. The bad news is that in 2019, we had the highest number ever reported in ADL's history in 40 years. You know, the good news, to the degree that there's good news here, is that I think in some ways people feel in the face of hatred that the only thing that they can do to push back is report. And so having an avenue for people to let folks know what they're seeing, what they've experienced, or what they've seen somebody else experience, I think is empowering. And I also think that when there's a hate crime, something very significant, I think having an expectation that law enforcement will respond is critical. So yeah, it's not a question of just reporting and then it goes into the ether. I think there should be an expectation that there will be action on that.
And earlier in our conversation, you talked about when we saw Paula from Tallahassee weighing in, you talked about a new hate organization out of Tallahassee. What can you tell me about this Boogaloo? It sounds like a crazy dance of some sort that kids are doing on TikTok, but I've heard it mentioned before.
Actually, Jenny, you know, the Boogaloo, I think, was more something that generations before us were doing, like in the 20s, a Boogaloo. And then it actually, the truth is, and this is going to be a little random, but if folks bear with me, it's a random sort of story, but it's true that, you know, in 1984, there was a movie called Breakin' 2 Electric Boogaloo, right? It was the second movie of a breakdancing movie, which I kind of enjoyed, but this is a long time ago. And what happened was, you know, extremists use pop culture and sort of, you know, put a twist on it, right? They're always co-opting sort of language and imagery in that's popular references because it's a way to get their message to expand. And so there was this concept of needing to start a civil war, the second civil war. And so Breakin' 2 Electric Boogaloo was sort of the second breakdancing movie. And so Civil War II Electric Boogaloo became sort of a saying, right? An ironic sort of humorous meme by some extremists. So eventually having a civil war in this country, shorthand for that ended up being just Boogaloo. Now, if you follow me thus far, it's a little strange. For some, like white supremacists who wanted a race war, who will get nothing but joy if they see white people and black people start killing each other in this country, they also co-opted that term. So for some, Boogaloo actually means race war. So this goes back to your question, Jenny, about, you know, what we need to keep our eye out for. Boogaloo, in most cases, is just a harmless term. But for some, in the right context, Boogaloo may signify, right, some sort of extremist sort of leaning or mention. And more recently, as we've seen the reopened protests after the pandemic, and now the protests against police brutality, there are actually groups of Boogaloo sort of cohorts who are going out and taking part in these protests, some in opposition to it, who identify as Boogaloo, some actually who are anti-law enforcement, who are also identifying with the concept Boogaloo. In California, somebody killed a police officer and a security guard, and actually put on the hood of his car in his own blood, I'm sorry for this being so graphic, the word Boogaloo. And so this is just something that, you know, again, terminology changes, language changes, extremists co-opt the weirdest things. We just need to be aware, because Boogaloo is just one of these things that has come to mean a lot more than an original breakdancing movie or what, you know, our great-grandparents danced in the 20s.
Mark Lee saying that they're using hip-hop and beatbox co-opting these terms, and that's a problem. Shilpa is saying, I got targeted by neo-Nazis and alt-right after Charlottesville and had a hard time finding any help from the ACLU and other groups. Finally, the Sikh Foundation and SALT helped me. And Shilpa says, it takes a turn and says, 80s Saturday movies on Channel 11, interesting slang. I didn't catch that earlier. So you're educating us. Anyone who feels that they're not being heard, what can they do? What can the ADL do for them?
Yeah.
So listen, if somebody is feeling harassed online in particular, in a way that, they're not getting answers from the tech industry, in particular where, we flagged these materials, then I would reach out to your local ADL office. We have 25 regional offices around the country. Our website has the contact information of every regional office. Find the one closest to you and reach out to them. We also have a report an incident form on our website where you can do it that way as well if you prefer to do it via form online as opposed to reaching out to a specific office. How we can help is either follow up with whatever platform it is that's not being responsive. If something major occurs, we can help perhaps put people in touch with law enforcement. Again, but more importantly, it's really important for us to be allies. So, I mentioned this before, you don't fight any one type of hate without fighting them all. So we're happy to be there to help protect and advance and advocate for anybody.
That's great to know. Rick says being anti-hate is only one side of the coin. Pro-love, pro-inclusion, pro-diversity is the other side and an antidote. Does the ADL address both sides of the coin?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of my colleagues in our programs, and I pro-love, we can sort of debate that, but certainly pro-inclusion. We definitely, only way to fight hate with a straight face, without getting burnt out, without, getting overwhelmed, is to focus on that second part that your viewer was talking about. That's where the hope comes in.
Excellent. Jennifer, already the hour has flown by, and we know we need to let Oren get back to his evening, but let's maybe time for a couple of quick questions, one from you, and I have a couple of questions, and the audience does as well. So audience, if you want to get a question in, type it now while Jenny's asking hers.
I just am fascinated about, some of the things we've learned from Oren tonight, and realizing just how critical education is. The more we know, the more we can combat this type of extremist rhetoric and these fringe organizations and the dissemination of this disinformation, etc. And truth be told, I just wondered if there's anything out there about these organizations we hear about, like QAnon and others like that, like we talked about earlier, that are floated in the mainstream media. If there's anything in particular people should be mindful of when they hear this stuff, or any talking points, even more so, any talking points people can use to combat this type of disinformation in conversation with others.
No, so that's an interesting question. I get that quite a bit, right? And in some circumstances, I don't think it makes sense for somebody to engage, right? So in other words, if you have some like hardcore extremist, for whatever reason, is in some sort of your online social space, probably the last thing you're going to do is sort of change that heart and mind. That being said, I think there are broader discussions about misinformation. And misinformation and hate are like cousins, right? I mean, they operate very much in the same spheres, where there's a dearth of content. There's just not enough content for people to borrow from, talking points, or frankly, more sort of current, like short video clips that help explain, concepts that, push back against the conspiracies and the hatred of others. And I think that's one area that's worth exploring. And we don't have all the answers, right? We have some. We do create content. We educate people about problematic groups, etc. But, how do you deliver positive messages that combat hatred in the most compelling way. I sort of maybe defer to others who have that expertise. You know, I think in some ways a 15-second TikTok video is more impactful than a whole set of talking points, especially to a certain generation, right?
Yeah, for sure.
We have several questions that came in. I'm going to read them, and then you can kind of synthesize and respond to any or all. Oren, I know you're an expert on this. Daryl says, would the ADL sponsor legislation to compel social media to take down these groups or people? Mark says, what do you think of groups that try to claim negative terms like the one NWA is known for, or why the Redskins are not the Redskins anymore, but the hate groups try to claim the terms that are being reclaimed? And let's see, how do you counter all of this when it's actually sanctioned by political leaders and governments, even though revisionist history, which adds to the crisis, we're seeing it in varying degrees in countries from the US to India and beyond. So it's a lot of stuff we've thrown at you. We want to give you a chance for kind of a final word. Rick is back, says, compassion may be a better word than love as a means to transform hateful fundamentalists. So over to you, Oren. Reflect on any or all of that. Thank you.
Yeah, of course, I remember every word that you just read to me. But you know, I will tell you, I have worked a bit with former extremists. These are people who were very hardcore white supremacists, jihadists, for example, people who changed, who are now dedicating their life to trying to educate people and bring people out of the movement. And, you know, one of the things that they mention is sort of this need to have a level of compassion for those that are haters, because that's what's going to reach them and change them more than us rejecting and hating them. I will tell you that's a very difficult thing, especially for people who have been victimized by this hate. The idea of reaching out to those who, in a sense, are, you know, promoting this hatred is challenging. And so, you know, I'm struck by the fact that every opportunity that has come up over the last several years, and really a long time, in terms of educating people about hate, giving them an alternative, has come in the wake of something terrible that happens. Shame on us if we miss this opportunity in this moment in time to do something positive with all this hatred. And so there was a question about litigation. You know, ADL has put together a campaign called Stop Hate for Profit, where we basically for a month said we're going to encourage people to not advertise on Facebook. Over 1,000 companies later, a message to Facebook that was sent. You know, it wasn't to try to bankrupt this company in any way, but it was to tell them that there are people who have higher expectations for that platform, that they need to do more, that Holocaust denial is not okay, that they have to take measures to protect their users. I use that as an example because I think that there are other opportunities for people in their everyday life to find smaller coalitions. You don't have to be Coca-Cola and Unilever, but you could be, you know, your aunts and uncles and your friends who come together to just create higher expectations and use your voice. This moment in time is going to be remembered for how people use their voice, how they pushed back, not for the hate and extremism that seems to animate our lives every day. I really believe that.
Wow. That's a great note to end on. Jenny, your thoughts?
I'm very moved by everything I've learned tonight. Like I said earlier, I'm very moved by the work that the ADL and Oren are doing, that Jonathan Greenblatt is spearheading. Their work is so critically important, and never more than today. We need to learn from our, you know, from the past, and stand up and be allies and not allow hate to dominate, which, you know, sometimes we feel like it does, to Oren's point. So thank you to Oren for his extremely, you know, helpful and educational talk tonight, but also for the work you do every day and for doing whatever you can to make this world a more compassionate place.
Thank you, Jenny. Thanks for being a friend.
And before you go, how can people support the ADL?
So you can go to adl.org and you can either visit one of the 25 regional offices, or you can support by either financially, or you can support by volunteering and putting your time and energy. Those of you out there who have a unique set of skills, I think that's actually something we're really looking for as well. We're always looking to learn from other people in other industries who might have ideas or concepts or approaches to fighting hate. We got to keep that conversation going with as many people as possible.
Rick says we need more inspiration and humor too, and you certainly have that. And on LinkedIn, that was truly inspiring. You got a hat and, I mean, a thanks palm and a carnation maybe. So thank you so much, Oren. We will let you go. Give you back your evening. We're really grateful to you, Oren. Everybody, please follow him at OrenSegal @ADL. Thanks very much, Oren.
Thanks, Sree. Be well.
Bye-bye. Jenny, thank you so much for arranging for Oren to join us. I know he's a pal, but I learned so much tonight, as did so many people. So thank you for that. And
yeah, really fascinating conversation. I was thrilled to be here, thrilled to talk to Oren and learn, like I said, and help to, you know, spread some information that is truthful information, shall we say.
Yes, we have the problem that we're fighting of the information pandemic.
Yes.
And Jonathan says important program, and Rick says kudos to the ADL. So thank you all for being here. Jenny, I have some admin stuff I need to do. I know you have to get back to your evening as well, so we'll let you do that. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you for
having me.
Thank you for being part of our team at Digimentors. I learn so much from you every day, and I'm very grateful that we could work together the way we are. And folks who are watching, Jenny runs our business development and strategy. So if you have a virtual event, you have a digital event you want to get some help with, talk to us, write to her. She is Jennifer at digimentors.group, and I'm Sree at Sree.net. You can easily find us, or just email me if you have a question. We'd love to talk to you.
Yes, we would.
Help you tell your stories in better ways. And you're looking at two chief digital officers, former chief digital officers in what, you know, we should come up with a joke of how many chief digital officers does it take to screw in a light bulb? The answer probably is there's no light bulb. It's all LEDs. So you don't
Exactly. Thrilled to be a part of your team. Thrilled to be a part of this amazing work we're doing together. And thank you for having me tonight.
Thank you. And we'll see you in the morning. And
right early.
Thank you very much, Jenny. And that's Jennifer Lazarus. I am Jenny Lazarus is her Twitter handle. Please follow her. Please connect with her. I'm so honored to have her and all members of Digimentors that I get to work with every single day. My vision when we co-founded this with Andrew Lee was having a team of people who think about digital and social, not just as strategists, but as doers. And that's certainly what we have assembled. So please talk to us how we can help you. We want to, before we read our, before we thank our sponsors once again, one of the things we do every single night on this show is to say their names. We asked Kimberly Crenshaw, the Columbia University professor who coined the term intersectionality, what can we do as allies to help the Black community? She said, say their names. So I want us to do just that. We used to do it with this image and these two images, Time Magazine, this incredible Titus Kaffir cover. And now, and if you're looking on the right is a photo of an untitled photo, undated photo of a young George Floyd with his mother, Larcinia. And she would die 2 years almost to the day that he would be killed in Minneapolis, and they are now buried together in Houston. So let us now say their names. And these names are from the Say Her Name report, which my viewers found for us. For example, Breonna Taylor, killed by police in her bed on March 13, 2020. So now I will read their names. And I'll ask you, how many names do you know? How many of these incidents do you know? How many of these stories do you know? Breonna Taylor, Tatiana Jefferson, Sherlina Siobhan Lyles, Corinne Gaines, India Kager, Sandra Bland, Alexia Christian, Maya Hall, Megan Hockaday, Janisha Fonville, Natasha McKenna, Tanisha Anderson, Aura Rosser, Shanique Proctor, Michelle Cousseau, Pearlie Golden, Gabriela Navarez, Yvette Smith. Again, how many names do you know? Renisha McBride, Miriam Carey, Kayam Livingston, Kayla Moore, Shelley Fry, Melissa Williams, Shulena Weldon, Alicia Thomas, Chantel Davis, Charmel Edwards, Rekia Boyd, Cherise Francis, Ayana Stanley Jones, Tarika Wilson, Catherine Johnston, Alberta Spruill, Kendra James, Latanya Haggerty, Margaret Laverne Mitchell, Taisha Miller, Danette Daniels, Frankie Ann Perkins, Sanji Taylor, and Eleanor Bumpers. Every time I read those names, I think of each one of those women had their own story, had their own tales, their own background, family, friends, loves, problems in their lives, as everybody does, and they're gone. As a son-in-law of a police officer from India, I believe that police are held to a higher standard, and that's why we say their names. And because we cannot have people being judge, jury, and executioner on the streets of America, and that is just not acceptable. Thank you so much for watching. We want to thank our sponsors who make this all possible. We're grateful to Muckrack Academy, Fundamentals of Social Media, free certification now available, mrac.co/social, mrac.co/social. More than 4,000 people have taken our class. I hope you will too, and you get a free certificate at the end of the course. We also want to thank our sponsors, nonbelievable.com, divinely delicious cookies on a mission. Each box of handcrafted cookies provides 2 meals to those in need. 20% off with the code SREE, S-R-E-E, S-R-E-E. And we want to say, we want to tell you about our other shows that we work on, including She's on Call. I'm honored to co-executive produce this, not be in front of the camera. Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar and Dr. Marina Kurian, 2 surgeons in New York, host and talk about all things COVID, but also have guest doctors who talk about other topics. And Dr. Ben Chang, who's a hand surgeon, and Dr. Claudette Lajam, orthopedics, were our guests yesterday. So please go into the She's on Call archive so you can find it. And we're very excited to tell you about our Sunday program before the She's on Call show, 8:30 a.m. Eastern time every single Sunday for 5 years now. Elaine Sciolino is with us. She's the contributing writer and former Paris bureau chief for the New York Times, based in France since 2002. Our colleague Neil Parikh, executive producer, spent a good deal of time along with our other colleague Carla Baranakis talking to Elaine this morning in Paris, and they were telling us how many great stories she has. So we're going to learn a lot and have a good time on Sunday as we talk about the pandemic and what it's like to have been a New York Times reporter. We read the New York Times out loud in print, and we've been doing that for 5 years on Facebook Live. So if you missed the show, our guest was Oren Segal, Vice President of the Center on Extremism at the ADL, a leading anti-hate org, and our co-host was Jennifer Lazarus. I am Jenny Lazarus, VP of Business Development and Strategy at Digimentors, the company that I'm honored to have co-founded. We're always looking for guest ideas, story ideas, segment ideas, collaboration ideas, and sponsorship ideas. My email address is right here. Please email me, sree@sree.net. Would love to hear from you. Would love to work with you any way we can. We have one other way in which you can keep track of everything we do instead of just subscribing to our YouTube account, which we'd love for you to do, youtube.com/SreeNet. See all the archives. We have this WhatsApp code for you, and this QR code allows you to easily hold up your phone and get a gentle alert every time we're live. It is not meant to be another WhatsApp group, because it's not. All you'll get is an alert when we are live on this show. So please do check that out. And thank you all for being with us. I'm so grateful to you. Big thanks to our producers, Vandana Menon, and Rose Horowitz at Rose Horowitz 31. Thank you for all the great tweeting. Thank you to Vandana Menon for her work and all the setup that she does. We've got great episodes coming up, including tomorrow, our first time that we're doing an episode. I'm sorry to say we haven't done one before. Native America Under COVID. Native America Under COVID is going to be an awesome show. Please join us, 9 p.m. Eastern. And that's episode 146. If you're watching later, you can catch that at 146. But this is episode 145, leading up on Saturday to episode number 150. Will be epic. 150. Join us for that. And thanks much to Neil Parikh, who has just joined us at Digimentors, for his last minute stepping in to help with some of the tech wrangling that has to be done. And that's why he is our new VP of Events and Communications here at Digimentors. Thanks very much, everybody. We'll see you soon. There's some comments still coming in. Steve George says, good job, Oren. Lisa says, super interesting. Mark says, Digimentors got major shout out on my show. Stefan was on and Roberta Oster. So he got lots of love, Sree. Thank you so much, Mark. And I don't want to show you this, but someone just came in and just posted a troll just came in and posted something terrible. Just really awful, awful man. And really sad that there are people like that in the world. I am lucky as a man that I don't get nearly as badly trolled as a lot of people do. And but it is terrible when it does happen. So thanks very much, everybody. And we will talk to you very soon. Bye-bye.